gorgeous faces. Look at all the shining, happy people. We're going to have such a good call. It was so hard because you know my rule of not trying to get the juicy stuff from the guest until the call, so it's fresh and I'm not just dialing it in for you guys. But this guy's good, right? Okay, so you guys know the rules. If you have any questions, please make sure to preface the question, type in the chat box, big caps, the word question. Otherwise, I will completely ignore it. I'll just assume you're chatting amongst each other. And also try to keep your questions quirky. We can Google, do you prefer fiction or nonfiction? What's your favorite genre? I want to know the good stuff. Do you wear matching socks? Do you have any weird habits that we shouldn't know about? That kind of stuff. I waited till after we were recording to let Stephen know that that's the gist of the call. So I've got Stephen. Is it Bolwby or Bolwby?
It's Bolwby.
Bolwby. Stephen Bolwby is here.
As you would now know, living in the UK, there's one of the most famous psychologists in the world who is from the UK, John Bolwby, author of The Attachment Theory. There's your first piece of trivia for the day.
That the name didn't even strike, but I do know The Attachment Theory, not the name. But I was put in touch with Stephen, and of course we're going to start the call on the one thing I said to Stephen that I don't want to mention on the call. I was put in touch with Stephen because I was having a slight meltdown about some files I had to get in at the last minute. I was panicked, and Stephen J. Cohen said, try this guy, Stephen Bolwby. He's amazing, and he's got this amazing ear, and he'll listen and tell you if you're okay. And he, not only that, but he was just this lovely character. I was in the middle of a massive breakdown, like 1 a.m. recording, freaking out, floods of tears because of the content of the book, desperate to get it right. And he was just, in a few emails, calmed me down, listened to my files, told me that it was going to be okay. The end of the world was coming, but not before the deadline. And he was lovely. And we continued to talk via email. And I thought, this guy has stories. We got to get him on. So, and he sent me a tiny bio, which was the most hysterical thing on earth, which I said, I didn't read this completely because I want you to share it with our guests. And he's also promised some juicy name-dropping Hollywood stories along the way, for the record. So, Stephen, tell us a little bit about, and also your narration. I checked out some of your samples before contacting you.
Oh, good.
You're a really good narrator, which is always a plus on these calls. So tell us how this all started.
Well, I've been in this business my entire life. I'm one of those strange people that from a very early age, I realized that I wanted to have something to do with film, television, radio, broadcasting, creation of production of all manner of things. So as a kid, that journey started out when my grandfather gave me a reel-to-reel tape recorder in elementary school. So pretty much it's been downhill from there. I've owned a lot of those and eventually got into photography and producing multimedia shows. At the risk of revealing too much of my age, that was kind of the thing in the 70s, people creating multi-projector shows.
Eventually doesn't tell me, how did you move from, so when you were in high school, what was your thinking? What was your, this is my life dream, this is what I'm going to be, when you were in high school?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was taking a couple of different directions. One, I was really developing the technical and aesthetic skills connected on multiple fronts. So there was an audio component, there was a visual component, and those took different forms. There was still photography, there was rudimentary early video back in the day. Prior to that,
conscious? Was this conscious? Was this like a plan? Really, in high school, that young?
Yeah. Very much so. And really, it started before that, even in junior high. That's when I got a hold of the 8mm camera that my dad basically got for, home movies that he didn't really use much. And I said, oh, I think it's time to make a movie. And so a couple of buddies and I got together and we created this film. We were in junior high, I think maybe 9th grade. this terrific movie called Invaders from Outer Space, because of course you're in junior high and a boy, so naturally Invaders from Outer Space would be pretty high on your mind.
Do you still have it?
Yes, I do. It would be in a tote in the crawl space. Yes, I still have that, and don't really ever bring that out for screenings or anything like
You
that.
should. You should have like a party.
Yes, yes. I'll rent some friends so that I can.
What about the guys that made it with you? Are you still in touch with them?
Interestingly enough, yes.
You should have them over.
Well, they're in different parts of the country. But yes, including one of whom, Bill Mesce Jr. is his name. And he worked for HBO for many, many years in the public relations department there, and has written several books, which are really terrific. One is a nice, juicy behind the scenes book about HBO, the history of it and what have you. And that was at the time that like The Sopranos came out, and The Sopranos was shot in and around my hometown of New Jersey. And so like all of those guys, they're like the guys I went to high school with in The Sopranos, the knockoff hoods. They weren't the A-list New York hoods. They were the B-list Jersey hoods.
And you don't have an accent. Did you used to have more of an accent?
When I listen to old recordings of myself, which it's been a long time since I did have a little bit more of that Eastern accent. Yes, that kind of got beaten out of me when I went to college in Western Pennsylvania, speech class and what have you. So I understood that I had that accent. And at that time, they were very big on saying, let's, make that uniform. Let's turn that into, mayonnaise for the rest of the country.
You can get it back though anytime, right?
It's no problem, and it particularly comes back after a couple of drinks, or if somebody
cool.
really pisses me off. It's kind of like, okay, I can go from zero to Jersey very quickly, especially when you're talking about stuff like the Falkland Islands.
Because your audience here, we would kill to be able to like switch that easily into an accent. I love that. That's,
and the that's one of the things that has helped me in audiobooks. I have kind of a back pocket full of stock characters that I bring out for different things, and then, polish them up and move them a little bit this way. One's a female, one's a male, whatever it happens to be. And, they're really useful. My mom would always say, oh, you're such a mimic. But yes, well, I'm now making money off it, Mom.
It's a rare talent, actually, and it's not something that a lot of people do, and it is something that I think a lot of writers just assume we all do. And I'm not a mimic. I'm very good at creating characters and creating people, but if you want somebody to sound like somebody else in particular, my mind starts drifting. And so it's a definite skill. Okay. So and
that's a fine line to walk too. What you're saying is exactly correct. There's as we know, all of us that do this, there is that fine line. Am I creating too much? Am I not just indicating the character, but am I going too far as to really be fleshing out a character in such a way as it's perhaps too much? I've had really great reviews that have said like, wow, it was hard to believe that there was only one guy narrating and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, well, how cool am I? And then I also thought about that a while after that, went, well, is that, I'm not like a, one-man puppet show here with all of is that the right thing to do? Because there's a lot of pressure in philosophy in audiobooks to do less. So you're doing more with less. That's
a big subject. That's a big subject. And I actually brought it up to Sean Pratt on his call a few weeks ago, because with a theater background, I don't know about you, but a lot of people I know that have been in theater, your biggest fear in the whole world is that you're overacting. That everyone else is fine, but you're the bad actor that's overacting and everyone knows it. And all it takes is that one review that makes you quit for 2 years. Not me, obviously, a friend, but you bring that with you into audiobooks. And what I learned very quickly in audiobooks is people either love me or they hate me. That I'm not an in-between. I'm not the girl where they spend 3 months really considering it's between me and another girl. They either instantly can't stand my guts or they like me. But even then, the way I've made peace with what you're talking about is I do the very best I can with my style, but if I can't find connection myself, so if that means maybe it's a bit too much for some people, but if I'm narrating for a writer, not a publisher, if I'm narrating for a writer, I am almost obnoxiously, I think I might scare some people in the beginning, but I'm really, really loud about the first 15 minutes. I say, you have to be 100% in love with this. Because if you're not 100% in love with this, then I'm probably not the girl for you, because there's not going to be any interaction. So between the sample and the delivery, where nothing's going to change. And we're going to end up in tears. So, and I don't read my reviews. I have somebody check them for me. So I think if somebody says that you did 18 characters amazingly, I think take the win.
Right. I'll take yes for an answer, every time. To your point about doing one of the extraordinary voice coaches that I've worked with a couple that have really just taken me all sorts of places. My gross insecurity is that I didn't come from a theater acting background. I wasn't ever an actor first. I was a technician, a visualist, a producer, and voice guy and broadcast, all those things first. So I have a certain amount of insecurity, and lots of the coaching that I've gotten has all been related to backfilling that acting stuff, and Nancy Wolfson, I've worked with for a number of years now. She has a company called Brain Tracks Audio. And particularly if you're interested in narrations and commercials and all of that, there is just no one finer to study with. She's brilliant. And she had this one little capsule thing that she said one day, which I've reminded her of a couple of times. I said, because you kind of need to put this on a card or something like that. But she says, trust your brand and service the copy. Service the copy and trust your brand. In other words, look at the copy, in our case, audiobooks, the narrative, the characters, the structure, where am I going with what is this thing? And bring the best
of who you are to it.
And then, and then trust your brand, because you're not going to be who you're not. I'm not going to become Scott Brick. I'm not going to become Johnny Heller. I'm not going to become Stephen J. Cohen. Each of us does different things. Although Stephen, you see, so kind and generous, just about the kindest, most generous man I know, certainly in our business. And were I not even in this business, I would hope that I would have found a way to meet him in my life. He's such a grand man. Yeah. He did say, this will sound ever so slightly immodest, yet it's amusing. So he said, I would like to cast you as Scott Brick's brother in something. Oh. He said, and then we co-occurred in New York at APA a couple of years ago when we were still live there, and we were all in the same place. And Scott and I were talking after a thing. We were just standing there in the auditorium at some seats and just talking. And Stephen is there going, yeah, he's like, I was right. So that was kind of cool. We have similar approaches to things, but I'm not him, and I'm not trying to be him, even as much as I pay attention to what other folks are doing, A-listers and what have you. I mean, I think it's inevitable in our business that you pay some attention to what those who have gone before you are doing. What are they doing well? What can you learn from them?
It's part of the learning. But you know what you said about not having a theater background? I learned a secret through the last few years, that every narrator, every single one of them that confesses, oh my God, I don't have a theater background. And it weighs heavily on their mind. And every single one that I know that does have a theater background is astonished that they even care or notice. And most of the people, it's funny that you said that. You're going to Nancy Wilson, you've got all this coaching. The people that don't have theater backgrounds have been pursuing theater workshops, theater classes, coaching. They're probably more trained than a lot of us that did have the theater background and were bored out of our eyeballs in college, in this class that was supposed to be fun. And, I remember the one where and he just kept trying to kiss all the girls. He gave himself the part to show us how it was done, that kind of theater class. I'm really old, so they probably don't do that anymore. They'd get in trouble.
I think you get arrested or at least tased.
Yeah. But so it's funny, isn't it? The things we think are maybe holding us back or worrying us, or it's just us thinking it. You're working with Nancy Wilson. She's the top, and you've been working with her for years, and you've got broadcasts. See, I hear the broadcast people. That was something I always wanted to do. And
yes,
your voice, you have to be more comfortable with your voice. You're up there with opera singers, aren't you? With the inflections and the confidence, right?
There's a thing about that. How to best encapsulate this? Okay, so back in the day,
right.
First getting into radio and stuff in college, I went out and visited radio stations as a kid. I was the annoying teenager, and back when you could still do that, call up a radio station like at night that was near where you lived,
did that,
and they actually answered the phone. Yeah.
Did they talk to you? The guy was mean to me, and he put
no,
me off.
These guys. Well, maybe it was because I was a guy, and it's like, it's a geek kid, so he'll be harmless.
And they let you join.
They invited me over. I went to a number of different stations at night and looked at this stuff and met the guys, and really, I got a behind the scenes sense for commercial radio early on, which was very exciting. And then my mom hooked me up to take a trip to WOR in New York, which was like the holy grail of radio stations, kind of one of several at that time in New York. And we used to listen at night to a guy named Gene Shepard. And
I
Gene
remember
Shepard
this bit in the bio. Tell us
this
story.
So Gene Shepard is a terrific author, really funny. He wrote a book called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash. And the movie A Christmas Story with Ralphie and the plastic leg and the elves and all that stuff.
Classic.
That was based on several of his short stories. So he used to have a show in New York on WOR every night at 10 o'clock. And he would talk, or he would read, or he would do whatever. But he was a raconteur of the nth degree. I mean, he was a consummate storyteller. He was fascinating. He was erudite. He was hysterical, all this stuff. Anyway, so my mom had worked for a radio station in Newark back in like the 40s, WNJR in Newark. And so I'm starting to get into radio as a kid in high school. And she says, I think a guy that I worked with at WNJR, Chris Cunningham, I think he's an engineer at WOR. Let me make a call. So she calls WOR in New York, and lo and behold, he's still there. So she said, I've arranged for you to go on in and meet Chris Cunningham at WOR. And I'm like, well, okay, this sounds like fun. So I put on my suit, I'm like 17 years old. I put on my suit and I get on the 33 decamp bus to ride from Caldwell, New Jersey into New York City. And I'm like, oh, this is just, this is okay. This is happening.
And how are you, like 17 or something?
17 years old. Yeah. So I get there, I don't remember the address at this point, but, just one of many quasi high rises in Manhattan. So I go up to the 11th floor, whatever in the world it was, where WOR is. I get off the elevator and I look around, and my first impression, don't forget, I'm like going to the mothership. This is a radio station that we listen to in the morning in the house and all this stuff. It is shabby and smelly. And there is like government desks and Bakelite telephones and those old creaky wooden government chairs. And it smells like smoke because, everybody's got a cigarette going still back then. And there are those perforated sound tiles, like maybe from school, you remember in the ceiling or on the walls or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
They're, with big chunks missing. And it's like, okay, here we are.
Yeah,
So,
we're not talking
first
velvet and
first little mini letdown there. So Chris Cunningham comes out, and he's this gaunt older man in like a cardigan, because of course, you'd wear a cardigan and his shirt has been laundered like 9,000 times. There's, it's barely hanging on him. And he's like, yeah, come on. So he takes me back through the studio area, through engineering and all of that stuff. And then there's just, window after window, these gigantic glass windows there with stuff going on, and the consoles and the guys and the ladies going back and forth. And this, it's like, there's bustle, it's genuine broadcast bustle. This is like the Beehive.
So you're getting a little more impressed at this point.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm 17. There's not, I don't get out much. So, so I go by this one studio, and lo and behold, there is Gene Shepherd taping his show for that night. And I don't think I had ever seen a picture of him, but I heard the audio from these, gigantic wooden speakers in there. And then I see him, and he's talking, and he's doing, and he's with the stories. And I'm like, so I say to Chris, who's, hauling me through this place, I go, that's Gene Shepherd. Like he didn't know, and, I said, gosh, it's sure, this is like what you say to your grandparents when you want them to buy you something, but you don't really want to ask for it. I say, boy, it sure would be cool to meet him. And Chris goes, oh, you don't want to meet him. There's a wall there. And he just keeps walking. I'm like, just second little peg of devastation going on here, disillusionment in the business. So he takes me back to where he's working, and he's sitting at this table amongst thousands of patch bays and whatever. And he's got this console table there with a log on it, with a broadcast log. And there's a telephone and this big wooden speaker and an ashtray, of course. And so while we're talking, every now and then, and the air signal was on the big speaker up above, a commercial would come on, and he would go, check that off, sign the log. And we'd be talking in another. That's what he was doing. His whole job at that moment was checking off what commercials were running on the air. So he proceeds to have this conversation with me and ask me why I'm interested in radio, why I want to get into it, whatever, and so on. And he says, this business will break your heart. It'll tear out your guts and stomp on it. This is a rotten business. This is a crummy, you don't want to be in this business whatsoever. It'll just suck for you your whole life. What else would you like to do? Well, maybe, because there wasn't anything else. It's like, well, maybe a magazine or something. Oh, it's the same thing. And I'm like, so on the ride back home, I'm sitting in the bus contemplating, my shattered illusion of what broadcasting was like. And I'm sitting there going, well, holy crap, I'm going to have to rethink my entire life's plan here. And what's going on? And it was during that bus ride that I then said to myself, screw that, screw him and the horse he rode in on. This is what I'm going to do. I don't care what anybody says. I will show them. And that was that moment. And that's why I feel so strongly about mentoring younger people in the business, or having discussions like this, or, whatever that is. Yeah. There have been these times in my life when people have come along and said something to me that was either, super positive or productive, or negatively productive, like that was, or saying, hey, listen, you sucked when you did that. You could do it better. And, whatever those lessons are that come to us at those moments, those are formative and really critical. And so that was one that just said, this is what I'm going to do.
And
so
it's a big See, you were strong, and you said, I love that you had that epiphany and that you backed yourself at that young age. And I have such an issue, because a lot of people think they're giving advice and that they're doing them a favor, and that this industry is tough and cutthroat. And if you've got the stuff, then you're going to have a thick skin now. And if you don't have a thick skin now, then you're never going to make it. And I couldn't disagree more, because by nature, artistic people don't always have a thick skin when they're 17 years old. And maybe you could just shut up a little and maybe hold a little of your bitterness in and assume that their story could be different than your story. I really think that's an excuse. And I think a little tiny bit of it is there's enough for us. There's not enough for for all you new young folks. We're just going to like, because you know what? If it's so bad, why are you doing it? And if you're still doing a job you absolutely hate, then do you really think you're the best person to be giving someone advice? I love the fact that you had the guts to, I had the smarts to stand up for myself with things like that. But to be honest with you, I'd say, screw you. And then I'd go and do a different thing anyway. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't keep pursuing what I wanted to pursue because I would believe in the back of my head, maybe they know something about me in the business that I don't know. Do you think that comes from your mother then? Because it sounds like your mother was really supportive and gave you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, she was. I mean, to the disappointment of both of them, I didn't take any business courses. They're both like, you should have something to fall back on. Well, I mean, but that was also part of my forcefully directed obstinance was, no, I don't, I'm also not going to learn ceramics. So let's just move onward with this. So yes, no, you're correct. And it is very much to her credit that it was cool that she had been in the business to whatever extent that was back when they used to, when musical artists would drop by and actually promo their records. She remembers meeting Cab Calloway at this radio station in New Jersey. It was hilarious. And she said he came sweeping in. I mean, for those of us that might remember at least seeing Cab Calloway in something, know who he is. He was an enormous presence.
I didn't know a lot of names, but I know Cab Calloway.
And he comes in and he's got his suit and his big cashmere coat, and he's like all of this, and he comes in with his record and says, "Hello, little lady, I'd like to see the station manager." And she goes, "Whom shall I say is calling?" Popped his little balloon there. So I said, "Mom!" So she understood that. And even a few of those little stories also gave me an understanding that all of us in this business, I talk about my little corner of show business, and, and we all have that. And I've been really fortunate. I've had a long career as a filmmaker and a director and stuff. And I've done studio work in lots of places and all sorts of things. We all put our pants or skirts on one unit at a time. And it's just, as you said, it's so much nicer to be good and helpful and productive to people than it is to carry on the other way. And believe me, this is a small business. Mm-hmm. There's lots of us in audiobook narration particularly, but overall in the entertainment industry, it's a really smaller business than civilians think it is. And I give you a really good example of that, because this is just like from left field. I had done a variety of post-production work at Paramount and a couple of other places in Los Angeles. And a good buddy of mine, Jonathan M. West, is a cinematographer, and he shot a lot of the Star Trek TV shows. He worked on the original Karate Kid. He worked on Charmed and bunches. He had a long career, particularly in episodic television. And mutual friend introduced us like 30 something years ago. We've been awesome friends for a long time. And we worked together on a variety of national commercial products, commercials for restaurants and stuff. And so, and over the years, I've been on his sets, and then we got to work together and whatever. But, brilliantly talented man who really understands Hollywood. So I was out there to do some post-production work. So I go to see him, and he says, "Okay, the show was Charmed. In fact, he was working on one of the last seasons of that at Paramount.
One of my secret guilty addictions a few years ago.
It's a cool show. Absolutely.
It's up there with Gilmore Girls. I hate to say it. You hate to be a cliche, but.
And he did a really cool lighting redo for them, give it a whole new look. He called it California Impressionism for, I think, the last 4 or 5 seasons of the show. So anyway, he's working on that. He said, "So, come on over to the set and, say hi. I'll, put your name in at the gate and all that stuff." Well, if you've never done that, it's really pretty cool, because when you drive up to Paramount and your name is at the gate, it's not like, you're looking in going, wow, what's in it? It's like you pull up and good day, sir. How are you? Who are you? Here's the driver's license. Oh, Mr. Bolwby, welcome to Paramount. So wonderful to have you on the lot. Oh, yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it's nice to be here at Paramount, back on the lot, where I come a lot. All the time I'm here.
But
Thank you.
I think we all have that little dream. Nobody wants to admit it anymore because we're in the world of everybody's supposed to be jaded. But we're actors. We're doing performers for a reason.
Yes.
We watched TV and wanted to be in that special world.
Absolutely. We all want to say, yes,
cool
I am.
Is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go in.
Drive in.
I drive in and I, it's stage whatever, 25, I don't know. He said, they're on several stages, not sure which one they'll be on at that moment. But, once you're past the guard gate, it's pre-COVID and all that. It's like you park and you're at Paramount. You're on the lot. You can go wherever you want.
Did you know how to sneak around and look at all the other sets?
Well, yes, I did. So, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
I had actually been there a number of times. So I had snuck around the back lot and, done a bunch of those things. So that was good fun. So I go over to stage whatever, and some people were coming out. So it was kind of perfect. So I go right in, and that's their stage. It was the big set of the house, their giant house, the interior for that. Yeah. That wasn't working at the moment. The work lights were on, but it's like, okay, well, I know I'm in the right place. So I kind of got to now find the right set. Yeah. So I start walking down past through the set, looking at stuff and whatever, nobody there. And I'm just walking. And then eventually I get to a craft service table that had been ravaged. There was several hours worth of old ham and things like this. Like, okay, they've been here. This is, as a movie guy, I know a crew travels on our stomachs. So they have been here recently. I have picked up the trail. So I go through a corridor that connects a couple of the stages. It's getting darker. That's good. That's a good sign. So I end up finally emerging onto the small stage where the morgue set was. So there they are. They're the morgue, like dead bodies.
Morgue. Okay.
I guess that got used a bunch.
Okay.
And so,
it did.
So I'm in the morgue. And there are these guys, these like ghosty spirit guys, and there's some dead body, and they're going like, and there's something going, whatever. So they cut, and now the setup's going on. And I see my buddy Jonathan at the other end, past the cameras and stuff. And so, I'm a visiting fireman, so I'm sensitive about when do you move, when do you not move, all of that kind of stuff. So it's like, okay, there he is. I'll head over there. So I start going in his direction, and over here from my right, I hear Steve Bolwby, and I turn, and lo and behold, one of the grips was a grip for me back in Colorado who had moved to Los Angeles and was now working on stuff. And of all the gin joints in town, he happens to be on the same small world.
Yeah.
Small world. So that was great fun. Because then everybody turns and looks like, who is this? Is this somebody else's blood who we have to kiss? Who is this?
You don't know Steve Bolwby?
You don't know? Look at him. Yeah.
But I wonder about that, because so in all your careers and all your hats and lives, where did you have the strongest feeling of the connection? Because that's what it is it's a connection to magic, isn't it? To the excitement and the dream of like movie making. Where do you feel the strongest connection to that?
Oh, that wears off so quickly.
Do you think it really does?
Oh, no. In a way it does not, but in a way it does, because I have now done this my entire life. I am well on the other end of my career from doing all of these things. So, not to say entitled, but growing up in the business and being in the business the whole time, it's like, well, of course, I'm here in this place. And of course but I do always have a feeling of like, oh, this is very cool, and I think that you're right. You don't really lose that sense of the magic and the creation, particularly, if you're on a stage in Los Angeles, they have by each door, they have all of these plaques of the pictures or the shows that were shot on those stages. And you'll always say, oh, it's Gone with the Wind. Oh, it's Arthur. Oh, it's, and you just go, yeah, they were all here. I'm here.
Yeah,
they're not here now, but
that's the connection. And when you're in LA and you're like in a place where, a famous event happened or somebody used to live, or even when you get booked for a book, every once in a while you get booked for a book and you open it and start reading it and think, oh my God, what narrator gets to do that one? And then you realize it's you and have to pinch yourself.
Yes, I did a Harold Robbins like that, a Harold Robbins novel. Wow. And that was like, it was just so cool because of that. And, and of course it has so much to do with the quality of writing and how, because we need to, you're exactly right. We have to forge that connection with the material. And it's certainly easier when it's well-written material than when it's challenging. I've just literally right before this, we went on the air here today, I just finished a book, and it was not that stunning in nature, wasn't that? In fact, it wasn't even well-proofed. There was just lots and lots of typos and plurals that didn't agree with each other. Are you seeing that? Are you noticing that more and more in manuscripts these days?
I'm noticing it less, and I don't know why. I noticed
you must be getting good stuff then.
I think, you know what? I think I'm getting different types of genres, and I'm more specialized in the genres I'm doing. I think that's what it is. I think the types of books I was doing before, there was more of it. I think maybe certain genres, I don't know why. Maybe I'm just, but I'm thinking about what you said about when you growing up in the business. And do you know what I'm thinking? The only way I can tap into a sense of joy and wonder is I put myself in my 15-year-old head. What would 15-year-old Daniela think if she woke up in this life today? What would 15-year-old Daniela from Fresno, California think if somebody said that she got to narrate this book? And I literally, because I'm not very mature, have a much easier time tapping into 15-year-old Daniela than like 90-year-old Daniela. But if your 15-year-old was already in the business, then you were probably much more mature than I was at that age already. You sound like you were pretty grown up in school with knowing where you wanted to go and knowing what you wanted to do. I was like all about the boys and the cakers. So I think you might have grown up slightly faster.
Yeah, I had my first commercial radio job when I was still a freshman in college. I got that job
you
right
were
away.
Focused.
So, yeah, I really was focused.
Yeah.
And that, and that isn't necessarily to my credit, nor, would I necessarily say to anyone, you should really focus early. Yes, if you can, and if
I don't think you can if you aren't. I think it's your personality. No. Yeah. I think some people just late bloomers.
Yes, yes. And I married my career for a long time. I got married a little bit later, and I was so focused on the career that, some of my relationships were just not really spot on. So is that good? Not necessarily. No, not at all. But it's what happened. I'm not unique in that way, but I would say certainly just exactly as you said, not everyone is like any given whatever, you need to find your path. And, audiobooks, I came late to audiobooks. I had done voiceover my whole life in one thing or another. But another one of my insecurities about that was, particularly in the broadcasting realm, and broadcast guys don't necessarily get a lot of credit over here on our end of the thing because they're not actors, because they're all concerned about sounding like this.
Everyone that you hear that, but to be honest, then if you look at the individual broadcasters, they're well respected. And no, he's different. He's a great audiobook narrator. Do you know what I mean? It's like you hear the cliche, but when you look at the actual people, if you're versatile and learn the difference, you learn.
Yes. And that's the key. You have to learn. And that also is something that I just love about our industry. I mean, I love audiobooks a lot. I don't want to not say that. I would be remiss if I let this afternoon go without saying how much I love audiobooks. I
Well,
love
it's
narrating them.
obvious in your
I like,
samples.
thank you. Because I'm a nutcase nerd learner. And I mean, I've only done like about 119 audiobooks. You know, you've had folks on like Mr. and Mrs. Heller and Hillary Huber and, you know, Scott, of course.
And I've had folks on with 4 audiobooks, and in the Cup of Joe, we're all literally in the exact same spot, just different parts of the path.
But what I found out was in the process of that, there were subjects, there were ideas, there were all kinds of things that I was not only exposed to, but, you know, had to co-sign for, you know, being the advocate of the author that I would just never have explored prior. I just,
right? You change, right?
It's so cool.
Yeah, you're like, you have to have an open mind.
Yeah, very much so.
And you do things for the money, and you literally end up learning things that you didn't really want to learn.
Yes,
like, that were
huge. Yeah. Yeah.
What made you do your first audiobook? What brought you to your first audiobook?
My first audiobook, I was training with Pat Fraley in Hollywood and doing stuff for commercial voiceover and a variety of things, and had gone out and studied with him several times at Buzzy's Recording there in Hollywood. And so then I picked up a couple of his other tape learning series, you know, CD learning things, and just kind of on a whim a little bit, I picked up the audiobook one, and I said, well, this is kind of interesting. And I listened to that, and then I went out and studied with him specifically for audiobook performance in 2009. It was called the $9 billion read, I think it was, and it was about the growth of the industry and what have you. And that's where I met Scott. He was a coach at that weekend, as was Hillary Huber, as was Stefan Rudnicki and Pat. And so at the formative end of my audiobook career, at the very beginning of it, I, you know, got to meet and work with those folks who are, you know, of course, all luminaries in our business, and, you know, with tremendous bodies of work and amazing perspectives, you know, and really generous, kind people, and direct. You know, there's nothing, there's nothing to be gained by saying, oh, yes, you're wonderful. Oh, yes, you're this. Like, yeah, no, don't tell me that if that's not true.
Yeah,
you know?
Hillary Huber, I had a coaching column. The first thing she said to me was, right, let's not waste I'm not going to waste any of your time blowing smoke up your ass. Let's just get on with the call.
Let's absolutely. That's, you know, I dearly love that about her. And so yes, none of this do we have any time to waste. So I studied specifically for that. And then one of the things that Pat said after going through that weekend of stuff is, job one, go produce an audiobook and give it away. Give it to your school, give it to the high school, give it to the college, you know, whatever, but do one. See if you can get through it. Well, yes, that would be a big thing. As we know, this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. So I found a book that I wanted to do that for, and I actually recorded it twice, the whole book, because like I listened to it the first time and I'm only like, geez, I suck. Okay. If I am going to pretend to do this, I like, you know, so I did it again. And then gave it to the charter high school library, where it presumably sits on the shelf to this day. I don't know. I would break my heart if it wasn't still there. I don't know. But, and it was a cool story too, which of course helped. It was called The Last Voyage of the Albatross. And it was the true story written by Chuck Geig that the Ridley Scott movie White Squall was based on. It's the actual story of this tall ship with school-age guys going on, sank off the coast of Florida back in about 1961. And I got a hold of this book, and in fact, got a hold of Chuck himself, who lives on Nantucket, talked to him on the phone, and he told me the story of how he got that story to Ridley Scott and that kind of stuff. It was very, very exciting. Anyway, so that was the first book.
But that's getting to know the authors, people that you admire, that you read books when you were only a kid.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, go ahead. I
Yeah.
digress. Sorry.
So no, right. When you can make that
Yeah.
connection, and I've had that opportunity over the years a few times to be speaking with those authors. Yeah, absolutely, it is. And a fair amount of the time they'll say, "Poh, glad you read my book and I didn't have to." Because haven't you also discovered that I don't know if you've had this experience, you call an author or you're put in touch with an author by some way, how to pronounce some obscure whatever, and they'll go, well, I don't know, I just know how to spell it. Okay, thanks.
I've learned with names, before I check with the author, I normally, if it's a name I'm not sure of, I YouTube it and I do interview so-and-so. And
Correct.
9 out of 10 times, there's one famous person on there that's probably a race car driver or something, or some woman pop artist or something.
Yes, or a molecular biologist.
Yeah, and I'll choose that. And you can usually tell depending on the genre of the book. And I'll choose that pronunciation a lot of times and not even check. And I've never once gotten it wrong, because that's where they get those names.
Yes.
Is like things they hear or read or see. So it's always out there.
What's the strangest or most maddening word you've ever had a proofer come back to you on?
Well, it's not even, I can't even, because my mistakes are very clearly, one of my very first books, he had a city called Margaretville in California. About like 200 times they mentioned it. And every single one of those times I said Margaritaville.
Of course you did.
Must have been subconscious. But stupid things. Do you not find stupid things? Lily. The main character of a book I just did was Lily. I have a problem with the word Lily for some reason. It doesn't go right off my tongue, especially when it's connected to other words in a sentence. So it's always your nemesis, don't you find? That you get like over and over and over and over again.
I find that there have been words that I have been mispronouncing my entire life because, like, my 5th grade geography teacher said it wrong, and it's like, wow, she must be right, because and only to find out that was not the case. I got corrected on one number of years ago. ANGST.
Angst.
Nope. Angst. I said,
is it?
You're busting my balls over here, angst. Yeah, no.
It's not angst. Is it angst?
Well, as it turns out, if you were to today go to your Merriam-Webster reference webpage, you will find that the first pronunciation is indeed angst, and the second one is angst. So, I should have stuck my ground. It's like, I didn't just come over here from Hamburg. Of course I don't say angst. I say angst. I'm from New Jersey. What do you want from me?
But some things are self-taught as well, which is a good sign. Someone said, don't ever be ashamed if you mispronounce a word, because that just means sometimes you taught yourself that word while reading the millions of books you read. Like my first pickup ever on a book ever was The Red Lady, and it was Fiery.
Fiery.
I taught myself that. Fury. Yes, that's what I taught myself in all those Gothic novels I read as a child. And, the bodice ripper ones when I was like 7, probably shouldn't have been reading them. Fury. Turns out it's fiery. Who knew?
It's fiery. Yes. Yes.
But do you feel that you're a smarter person because you've narrated audiobooks? Do you feel that it's opened your mind and changed you?
Oh, my goodness, yes. Yes, without question. Sometimes immodestly so, because I can't wait to tell people, I just narrated The Planet of Viruses, and let me tell you something about COVID-19. Oh God, here he goes, but so there's been some of that, but no, I mean, let me go into a tiny, potentially controversial subject and not take sides, but just note both sides.
Yeah.
The 1619 Project. Okay. The New York Times' project, it came out, and it's about that we should reframe American democracy based on slaveocracy. That because the first slave ship came over in 1619, that 100% of all commerce in America is based on slave trade, whatever, and so on. Okay, so that's that argument, and there that is. So the New York Times created this alternate framing of history and curriculum resources for classrooms and schools, and a big deal, very woke, all of those things, whatever. Okay, so I knew about that, but I hadn't particularly studied the 1619 Project per se. And I was cast to narrate a book called 1620, A Critical Response to the 1619 Project. So in this, boatloads of scholars weighed in on their problems with the scholarship of the 1619 Project. And that there are, I mean, as you know, scholars, I'm sure you've met more than 4 of them in your life. These women and men spend their entire lives in libraries and places and stuff, learning and researching and figuring. Anyway, the preponderance of the particular scholars of the particular eras that this is talking about are not entirely happy with the scholarship represented in the 1619 Project. They would go so far as to say it's fast and loose on many, whatever. So that's just one little capsule experience that I've had, going, wow, here are things not only did I not know, but I didn't know.
You go down a rabbit hole.
Very much so. And this points out, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this points out a key teaching that I was exposed to early on in my career by the dean of Disney University. His name was Mike Vance.
Cool.
And he taught me this particular idea, which I don't know was necessarily unique to him, but that's the lineage by which it came to me. And that is the 4 ascending stages of competence. Have you heard this? Does this sound familiar?
No, my mind's immediately going to Maslow's hierarchy, which is totally different. So
the 4 ascending stages of competence, and this is so critical in everything.
Oh, wait. I think I have heard of it when people use driving a car as an example. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So the lowest stage is unconscious incompetence.
Yes.
You have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you don't have any idea that you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Colloquially, from New Jersey, we might say you're talking out your butt. Okay, so we have all done it, and we all know people that do it, and all the rest of it. You have no idea. Dunning-Kruger, you have no idea.
Yeah.
Along comes someone or an experience or whatever where you go, oh, holy crap, I don't know what I'm talking about. Excellent. You've come up one rung on the ladder. You are now consciously incompetent. You now know that you do not know how to take this man's appendix out. Yeah. Okay, so now if you study and get real about that, you can become consciously competent. You can do that well as long as you keep your eye on the ball. And then you do that for a long time, you become unconsciously competent, like driving a car.
Driving the car.
And then that's when other people want to show other people how well you do it. Yeah. So that's a critical teaching that just has everything to do with every aspect. And it's something that I noticed about myself with particular regard to audiobooks. So I did my first few and I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good. And and on we go, and it's like, wow, I have 8 books and then I have 10, and so,
we all do that.
And we all do that, right? We all have belts with notches on them. Yeah. We all know exactly how many, maybe Scott doesn't anymore, but I'll bet he does.
And I got cured of it when Anne O'Grady Flosnick told me, she goes, but how, I said, but you don't lead with, she's done like 400,000 or something. So I'm like, you don't lead without your number of books? She's like, no, she goes, like, because if you really have a lot of books, most of them are dropping off half the time anyway.
Right.
Because they're on ACX and they just disappear. I'm like, you mean you lose your numbers? Because I've been leading with 150 and I'll like plus.
Yes, plus. Well, we all use the plus, of course. And at some point that does get pathetic, I'm sure of it. But nonetheless, but I did notice something, because there's this, isn't there the sense someone put a semi-artificial number on this, that there is a number of mastery,
10, like 10,000 hours to master anything.
Well, there's that. But in audiobooks specifically, isn't there like, if you've done 60 books, maybe it's for Audible or something. You're considered the, I don't know, whatever that is.
You see, I don't like that kind of thing.
Well, I don't either, but I noticed something in my own performance.
Yeah.
After, and it, in part, it must be a mental thing. I don't know. But when I got past 100, I started noticing that I was doing some things differently and easier than I had been doing them before. I really had gotten better at it. My corrections were fewer. My start and stops were fewer. I was quicker to get into the material.
Yeah.
I was quicker to get facility in adapting to the author's voice. And it took that many, because I'm kind of a slow learner. So it really took that many before I really felt like, wait a second.
You still, don't you think it's not a slow learner? You're obviously not a slow learner with the types of work you've done your whole life. I think we each have to, if you stop that, I think that's why, and I think Sean Pratt said this as well, why coaches coach. Because when you get to unconsciously competent, you become the reticular activating, whatever, when your mind is just like working on a loop and you're not consciously buying into it. So then you're not engaging. But coaches, by the fact that they have to coach, they're reinforcing and they're reopening their neural pathways. So they're reteaching themselves the same thing. So, and then they're bringing themselves up a little bit higher because they're engaged in it. So I think that you probably hit on something when you said, oh, it could be something. I think in your mind, because I know for myself, the few times that I felt, oh, wow, I'm not making very many mistakes at all, was because life is being kind, no construction work. My throat's okay. I'm like, but also because I'm having a confident day. Because in my mind, whatever that little thing that I won't bring up at the beginning of the call that you helped me with, it's like a milestone I wasn't able to get that was pissing me off, that I felt like everyone else had it. When I got that, suddenly it was like a hurdle. I think like we're our own worst enemies. I think Stephen, like at 30 books, was probably, but you gave yourself permission, maybe at 100.
Yeah. Don't we all go down the road to a certain extent being our own worst enemies to a point, and to the extent that you can tame that lion, is, I think, allows you to get over those hurdles you're talking about. You just get out of your own way and service the copy and trust your brand. I'm going to sound like I sound, if I'm concerned about the quality of my voice, like I was back in the day in radio. These guys, we would talk about, oh yeah, he brings them in a wheelbarrow. Like, oh, okay, got it.
What's that mean?
That means he has enormous genitals, and as such has a very booming voice. So bring them in a wheelbarrow is what we call that. You hadn't heard that before. Okay,
no.
got it. Yes.
I've obviously led a sheltered
Sorry, ladies.
life.
So sorry. But right. One of those little broadcasting things. I never sounded like that. I was not one of those guys. I wasn't going to be super Mr. Radio DJ. I wasn't going to be those things.
Did you ever
I'm kind of a regular guy.
Show? Did you ever do the nighttime show?
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Wow.
Every shift you can imagine.
I wanted to do the nighttime show on the radio because you're talking out there to like everyone in the world.
Hey,
like
buddy,
that was a dream of mine. I still think maybe if I'm 80, they might hire me if I need a second career.
You'll be better. You'll be like Alison Steele. Yes.
I always wanted to do the nighttime radio show.
Yeah. So I did that in college. That's where I started, was in the late night stuff.
Like music or talking to people? Like
both.
You did a talk show.
Well, I talked a lot between records. I would do things, and because Gene Shepard was one of my. I did not take I did not do the Joe Joe, who just died a few years ago. In Los Angeles. Oh gosh. This is terrible. I can't blank on this name. This is so important. Joe, hang on. I'm Googling. Everybody relax. I'm Googling.
Because I listened to Dr. Laura when I was young, really young, very, very young.
Joe Frank. Joe Frank.
Joe Frank.
Joe Frank.
For the audience, speaking of talking to people, oh, wait, we have a question first. So
Hi, Deborah.
what is the real secret, Deborah wants to know, of getting the confidence factor into your read?
Well, yes, that's such a great question, because I certainly struggled with this. And Pat Fraley, my first voice coach, would say, if he could only teach one thing, it would be confidence. So I totally respect hearing about that. I'm going to cough, but I have a cough switch. Excuse me.
Okay.
Thank you. So good coaching is the key. It just is. You find a coach that you can work with. You find someone who is doing this well. You find someone that you have that chemistry with. As your skills get better, you will, at some point, it's not quite like a light switch, but it does happen, and it's progressive, and you will realize, wait a minute, I'm really doing this very well. I'm doing this much better than I was, and I'm good at this. I'm okay at this. And plus, you have to give yourself permission. That sounds so woo-woo, but you do have to give yourself permission to get better and to be better, and to no longer be how you were, but be how you are now.
Yeah, that doesn't sound woo-woo. That you've got to ignore the itty bitty shitty committee in your head.
Oh, nice. Yes, right.
You got to it's great, but it's easier said than done. Yeah. And I mean, because you think, because it is the inner voice, but don't you think that at the time, I don't know about other people, but at the time, I'm not thinking, oh my God, I've got to stop being negative. At the time, my confidence takes a dip my confidence, it never seems clear that, oh, this is me. It always feels like it's something else, when really it is you.
Yes, and the universe is not conspiring against you.
Are you sure?
Relatively. Most of the time. It can't be, because it's conspiring against me. It doesn't have time to conspire against all of us. I mean, come on. Yeah. No, I hope that that was a good answer to the question. I'm always looking for steps and really concrete answers to things, and I'm frustrated when they aren't as simple as I think they should be. So I hope that that answer had some value to you.
Do you feel confident? Like in life, you seem really confident human being. Do you feel it all the time?
Yes, overall, I do. Yes, give or take. At the same time, though, when I'm doing new things that are unfamiliar to me, or what have you, I can be as much of a people pleaser as anybody, in terms of, I think, I won't speak for anyone else. I'll just speak for me. It's embarrassing to do things not well. And so when the first time you do something, you're likely to not maybe do it all that well. And there are those times that my expectations of myself really don't match what's going on. Buddy of mine has an e-bike, and I had never been on an e-bike before. This is like 3 days ago.
What's an e-bike?
An e-bike is a battery assisted bicycle. So you pedal and it gives you a boost. It's good for old people. So so I got out, okay, I'll do anything. I don't care. I learned to jump a four-wheeler last year. It's like, okay, well, this is kind of cool. First time, good to have a coach.
Yeah. Because they can see without the story you're telling yourself. Yes.
I can't imagine, for instance, I don't play golf. Yeah. It's not that I have some sort of like religious thing against it, or I don't care. It seems a little bit odd to, if you wanted the ball to begin with, why did you hit it over there? So you have to go get, I don't know. It's like you had it and you got rid of it. So I just never, and I don't have that kind of time, because I understand that to get good at golf, you really have to put in some time. But because of, how it is, and many of you may play golf, and so this, it's like, that's kind of a specific, odd movement that doesn't really come naturally. So if you teach yourself to swing chances are you're not going to teach yourself to swing really well. And wouldn't a few lessons from a golf pro at whatever price save you 6 months worth of woodshedding to do that, and get yourself some confidence, because the confidence is important to have so that you start to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, you're buying confidence. That's what you're buying from them. You're buying confidence. It might not necessarily get you faster, but
that's a great way to put it. Yes.
I get angry at myself, and I get so angry that I quit things. When I'm starting something, unless I really have to get it done, new things piss me off because I like being good.
Yes.
But if you've got a coach, you're buying confidence.
You're buying confidence, and you buy so many things that are of varying values.
Yeah.
You might buy that sofa or that rug or that German shepherd or whatever it is. And, you have diminishing returns on that. So feel free to buy coaching, buy some expertise.
Yeah.
And, and as you know, the coaching thing cuts both ways. I've been asked by people, are you going to coach? Will you coach? Would you coach? It's like, I don't. I'm not a coach. I don't want to be a coach. I guess I have a couple of things to say about some stuff, and I would coach only because I want to see people get better faster than I did. So I do like giving back. At the same time, don't you hate it when somebody does something about 4 times and then they hang out their coach shingle?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy. And
I got to give them credit for confidence, but I wouldn't pay them money for it.
But you wouldn't know, would you? If you were inexperienced and you saw, Joe Blow's shingle for famous coaching, you want to go to the Mr. Haney famous acting school from Green Acres, and there he is. It's like, first rule is don't look at the tomato can. Okay,
but
got it.
It's buyer beware. I don't have much patience with people that don't do their research, and you don't just get a coach because other narrators on social media have a coach, and they look successful, so I'm in.
Yes.
What I mean? Do they do the genre you want? Are they addressing the issue you want to address? The information is out there. All you have to do is stick their name on Facebook and read people's posts about them. You can find out who's gone to them, what they've taught them, what the reviews are, because you're not going to. But I don't want to forget this bit. I'm going to catch you, the most important part of the call.
Oh my goodness! And it's at the end when almost no one is left.
Always at the end.
Thank you, everyone, for being so supportive and staying to the very end. Grace and Deborah, especially. Thank you so much.
No, but this is the thing. This isn't for the people, obviously for you guys as well, but this is for the YouTube audience that's going to be watching you in the next 60, 70 years. Do you have any final words of wisdom or whatever you'd like to leave them with that you've learned that you would like them not to forget, that you think would help?
Yes, absolutely. Try things and fail often and fast. Learn what it is that interests you. Go try it out, fail at it, discover that's not what you want to do, leave it behind, pack it in the closet, and don't look at it again, or have some pictures on your hard drive or your scrapbook or whatever. Try things out, but do it earlier, do it young. Try things out and fail faster, younger. And then you'll find
it. Do it old too, though. Do it old. It's never too late.
Oh, yes, of course. I'm just saying that, because the people that look at this in 60 years will be 12. So,
good point. Good point.
I'm just saying, get started on that. Yes, no, but absolutely right. You are certainly never too old to learn. 2 of the most exciting books that I've narrated just this past year. One was called The History of the City-State of Boston, and the other was called Unworthy Republic. And both of these were history tomes, were scholarly in nature. I get cast to do some of those kinds of things. Scholarly stuff, a little bit more erudite. I'm a relatively quick study on some of that stuff. I have an okay voice for academic kinds of things, and I don't.
You've got a seriously good voice for those things.
Thank you. Yes, and so I do that, and just for any casting directors that have stayed with us this long, I love popular fiction. I love thrillers.
For the record,
and true crime and noir. and of course showbiz titles. But to learn insights about stuff early on. So never stop learning. That's really the big deal.
I think if the sample I listened to was a crime, I think it was a crime sample. I listened to one, and I thought, because I'm a thriller girl, and that was I was like, wow, because I'm also an audiobook listener, and I like American male thriller narrators that can have a rough edge, but not just rough. I want you to sound literate as well as you're chasing, the demon or the bad guy or something. You want a little bit of an erudite bent, no matter what the genre. So I
think that's always, thank you for saying that. I think that's key as part of the connection to the audience. I think we're responsible to never speak down to an audience. The audience is connecting with this material on whatever level. My job is to be the guide, to be the advocate for the author and connect people with stories.
Yeah. And you do it well. Are you going to do any more films before I let you go? You doing any more films?
Not at this moment. No, I can't say anything about a couple of things that are in development. I can't believe I just said that word, but it's true.
That's exciting.
With someone in Los Angeles, we're working on a couple of things, but it's a ways off. So
what you could do
yet to be scratched.
In the meantime, grab that video from the attic or basement where you said it was.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Zoom
Let's get that
with your
out
two
there.
buddies. You can Zoom. There's no excuse in the new world.
It's true.
Yes,
it's true.
Get a couple of drinks and Zoom with your buddies. The first film you ever made. I think that would be a fabulous Zoom call.
That's a cool idea. We'll be more than a couple of drinks.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me on this show. This was so much fun, Daniela.
Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. And thank you guys for joining. It was so lovely to see your wonderful faces again. And this will be out in a few weeks on YouTube. Take care. Thank you. And thank you so much for saving me that day. My files were delivered safely, and a little bit of confidence was all I needed.
There you go.
Thanks so much. Bye, Stephen.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Bye.